Welcome everybody to today's webinar about form logic and how you can enhance your SharePoint Forms with a couple of powerful things. Today speaking, it's myself, Matthias Walter. I'm the Chief Product Officer at Skybow, and you can reach me via email, on LinkedIn, or via Twitter. Before we start with that webinar, I already want to announce the next webinar from our short webinar series that will be held on February 8th. It's Wednesday at 4:30 p.m. and the topic there will be about calculated columns. And it's not about the calculated columns from SharePoint out of the box for sure. It's about our calculated columns which can be calculated in the background, doing aggregation, doing metadata inheritance, and so on. So quite a powerful thing. If you're interested in that topic, please sign up already today using the QR code here. So if we talk about form logic, then we at Skybow, we provide a couple of things you can do to enhance your forms. First of all, we have actions. We have the possibility to put actions in a command bar, on buttons, on form load that should be executed. For this one, we had a separate webinar, which is linked right above, and you can watch more details on that one in that other webinar. So it's not part of today. But with the actions, you can enhance your form. The second thing is about expressions. We have our own expression language, which is similar to what you have within SharePoint, but ours is based on JavaScript, and we can really add those expressions to every control. So a control can be a tab, it can be a field, it can be a row, or a rich text. Anything on a form is a control. Not all of them will have all these 6 options, but at least visible and enable should or visible should be for every control. So you can define on a dynamic way when something should be visible or not, based on user inputs, based on group memberships, or whatever. And then for the fields itself, for the form fields, you have these 6 options. I will show you in the demo afterwards. You can define when the field should be visible, if it should be enabled or not. So it's there, but it's probably disabled. And you can define initial values. It's similar to the out-of-the-box default values, but in our case, it's possible to have an initial value also on the edit form, and it's possible to have an initial value on every field type, not like in out-of-the-box where you just have a couple of field types which allows you to define an initial value or a default value. In our case, we can do that for every kind of column, even lookups or people picker fields, doesn't matter. Same is for calculated value. There we are not using these calculated fields which are there out of the box. It's every single field and every field type we can turn into a calculated value or a calculated column, which is automatically calculated once you enter data into the form. The 5th option is the required. So out of the box you can just choose the field to be required or not on a static way, but in our case you can specify a field which is optional to be required once you choose, for example, a status. You choose an inactive status, then you have to provide maybe an additional reason for that inactivation or an inactive date or something like that. So these fields can get dynamically required. And last but not least, the validation. We can validate each field and each field type, on the input format, for example, or to compare with other fields like date comparison or using regex and so on. So the field can be valid or not, and if it's not valid, you're not allowed to save the form. Another thing we can do, we can add tabs to a form, and the tab name can be rather just static, or you can make the tab name dynamic, which means in a lot of cases what we have is we have tabs for adding sublists or sublibraries, and if you want to know if there are some items in that tab, and you don't want to click on every single tab to check if there's something in there, you could add, for example, a number in brackets. Is there one item, two items, or just 0? And 0 means you don't have to go there because there's nothing. That's one of the use cases for a dynamic tab name. I can show you in the demo afterwards. Then lookup filter. If you have a SharePoint lookup to another list, then by default you would just see all the list items from the target list, but probably you want to filter them on a hard-coded way or on a dynamic way. So if you choose some category, then the lookup should be filtered based on that category, stuff like that. That's another form logic possibility, and then we have two more which we also will not discuss in this webinar, or I will not show you this webinar because it's too big for the short webinar. There will be separate webinars about those topics. It's about our formatting possibilities. Formats can, or styles can be added, but then can also be added with a condition. So the style would only load if a condition is true. And if it's false, then the style will not be loaded. So this way you can have conditional formatting on a form. And last but not least, the sub-libraries is also kind of a form logic to have something like what you probably know from InfoPath. It's called repeating sections or repeating tables. We are using sublists and sub-libraries to make something like a master detail relation on the form. So we can easily add sublists to a form. And yeah, as well, this one we will handle in a separate webinar. Okay, but then let's jump into the demo where I will show you all that stuff in a real case. Therefore, I'm taking an expense case, which is a monthly expense request, and for each month you're going to add receipts. You upload receipts and you define some metadata to these receipts. So from here, from the start page, I can start a new expense request from this button here. Here we go. This is a skybow form. We have some tabs. We have here two columns. And first of all, the first thing we see here is that these 4 columns are automatically populated using our initial value expression. So that's what we can do. Let's look at the first one, which is a standard choice field. We've added a couple of years here, and with an initial value we automatically calculate and set the current year. So it always takes the current year just as an initial value. I'm able to change those values now in the form. I could say, okay, no, it's still for, I don't know, December 2022, but it helps me to pre-populate that form automatically by the current year. Next year it will be 24. So that's one thing. Out of the box, you can just choose a fixed value like 2023, but next year you have to change that default value in the background. And in our case, it's dynamic. Same is for the month. I've added a choice field for the month, 12 months, and it always chooses the correct one from the current month. Over here we have two people picker fields. They're populated by myself in that case here, the user who's logged in, and also we're able to access some profile information, in that case my manager, which is Sebastian. And this is all just using initial value expression. I will show you later on how this is done in the background, but first I will go through all the scenarios. Then there is some kind of validation in here on that manager field, just as one example. Here if I delete, okay, it's a required field, and that's already a conditional formatting here that it gets red. It's because it's required and it's not filled out. But if I would try to set myself, because yeah, I probably want to approve my own expenses, this is not allowed. So that's a validation. It will check if it's not the same user. The employee and the manager cannot be the same user. So it should be someone else. So like this, and then it's okay again. So that's the validation expression that we have here. If we now move forward to the receipt section, that's a sub-library that we've added here. Plus we also see the tab name, which is dynamic. We have a name which is static, receipts, and then in brackets we have this 0 because we don't have items right now. If I would now upload a file, I can click upload, or I could also simply drag and drop a document from somewhere, from an email, from a scan folder, whatever. So like this. And it directly shows or opened the edit form or the edit dialog for that particular document. That's another setting we can do on the sublist, that this is automatically open. And as we can see, it's this dinner file that I have chosen or I've uploaded, and some things are on this form as well using form logic. Another validation could be this one here. So for the date, if I choose a date, now we are in January 23, if I would choose an older date like December, it would recognize, oh, that's not the, it's not a matching, it's not matching, the date is not matching the current expense request, which is January 2023. So this text is also dynamic, so it takes the text, the month from here, and I can go back to here, and now it's valid again. Another thing is we have this expense type, and that's a choice field, and if I choose food, for example, then I see that cost field, which is required. I have to enter some costs, and if I would switch over to kilometer allowance, we see that some other columns appear and they're required, and the cost field we saw before disappeared, and therefore it should also not be required anymore, otherwise I cannot save the form. So these two fields are now visible. It's a combination of visible expression and required expression at the same time. So they get visible and they're automatically required. So I cannot save that form. I have to enter a title, okay, that's a dinner, whatever. So this one would be okay, but still I have to enter some amount like 100 kilometer for 0.5 allowance. And now one further down, the total cost is another example of calculation and enabled. So on this field we have a calculation which is based on the user inputs here, and it's hard-coded or static disabled. This could be made dynamic as well, so it could be enabled once you, I don't know, have a checkbox and you say enable it and so on. But this is just fixed, disabled, but you see it, so you see the value. It's not just calculated in the background. You see what is calculated. And if I would change here to 0.6, it's 60. So on that field, we have two more expressions, the calculated expression and the enable expression. Last but not least, on this form here, we have a lookup. So that's an out-of-the-box lookup field. I have a cost center list in the background where for now I have 3 cost centers. And let me show you. Duplicate cost center. That's my cost center list here. And what I have added to this list is a simple active flag. So I can make cost centers active or inactive. So I have 2 more down here, 2 tests. And that's what I have here is a lookup filter. So I'm filtering out the inactive, and I just show the active ones. That's a filter. And this is now a static one. It's a static filter, but I can combine it and make it dynamic. For example, that's just a test scenario. Maybe it's not really a real use case, but I could say show me the active, inactive cost centers as well. Now I have these 3. If I switch here, just to show you that it can also be based on other data which is on the form. Now I see the tests as well. Now I see all of them. And if I switch back, it's gone. So this is the lookup. There's a filter on it. And another small thing I did not mention is this little button here. We are able on lookups to specify or add this new item link, which gives me the option to add a new cost center right from within this form. So I don't have to say cancel, oh, the cost center is missing. I go here, I add the cost center, and then I have to come back and reload the form. I will lose all the data. So I can do that directly from here with this button, which is just an option. You can also hide it. Now once I'm done, click Save. And as you can see, the one here is automatically, or the tab name is updated automatically. Good. Now let me show you how this will look like in the background or in the configuration itself. Now from the list, we have this SharePoint Forms customization button, which will show me all the forms that are available on that list. We can also do that on libraries, but this now is a list. We have just one new form. We have a couple of edit forms because we are able to add additional forms, additional edit forms or display forms, doesn't matter. And with one click, and we were on the new form, we can go to the customization, so the form editor. Now you see it looks pretty much the same. We have all the columns here, and we have some, next to every field and every control, we have these curly brackets, and the curly brackets are there for the expression configuration. And for the field, you see we have these 6 configuration options. For maybe the tab, we only have the 2, visible enable, and for the row as well. And we can specify that for each field of control. Now on the employee, we saw it was pre-populated with my user. If I click on the curly brackets here, I'm getting this, what we call our expression builder. And in the expression builder, we are able to add and access the column values directly from here. And we have these double brackets, which are our placeholders. Basically in here we have three different expression types, from very simple, which is a template. It's just a text, and we can add placeholders to that text, which are replaced. That's a template. The assignment is a single line of code, like in Excel, where you have one formula on one line, and function is for the more experienced people who can really write code. And in our case, it's always based on JavaScript. So everything what we see here in assignment or function is JavaScript, plain JavaScript, enhanced with our placeholders. If you want to know more about these things, we have a link here in the upper right corner which links to our article of the expression builder with more details about it. Okay, so now for the employee field. Next to the fields, we have a couple of context objects, and one of that is the user. So here we can access the current user information like email, login name, the name itself, and also profile information. So if we have profile like a cell phone, department, or the manager, that's just here. And simply we can add them simply by double click here, or the whole expression builder is IntelliSense based, so you can start type manager. We do have a manager field, but in that case we see it also from the user profile here. So now we already are here. And to set a people picker field, we can simply take the login name of the current user, that's the one here, this one as an assignment, and that's already my initial value. What we can see from within this field here, if we have not the expression builder open, the first character here defines the type. So if I choose, if I have an equal sign, it's assignment. If I would switch to function, it would add these curly brackets. So if you type it in here and you type it in without anything, then like this, then it's recognized as a template. Now we see it's a template. But for my case, I have to choose assignment. And that was the one thing I've added to my column, and that's it, nothing else. So that's really low or even no code. The same is on the manager. We have the manager here, and to have a more complex scenario on the calculated, we have added some code. This code here would really take the user added to the employee user field, which is this one here. If you would change that to someone else, it would automatically populate the manager of the user added here and not the one who's logged in. So that's this code here, which looks a bit complex. And then we have the validation, which checks simply the user, and I'm comparing the ID should not be the same as the manager. This returns true or false, and this way it's valid or not. If it's not valid, we can also specify some text, which is then displayed. That's what we've added here. And on the other side, here we have the year, which was also having an initial value. And this is little JavaScript, but really simple one, a new date, get full year, and make a string. We can test it down here, and we see it will return 2023. Now, if we would have tested back in December, then it would be 2022. And that's my default value, quite simple, right? Same is for the month. Yeah, here it's also having just an initial value to get the current month. On the tab name, we see if we add a tab, I have the display name of the tab. If I double click or if I click on this pen, we can specify the name and also make it dynamic using the expression. Now, since we've added a sublist to this form, we have an additional node down here, an additional context, which is sublists. It lists all the sublists which are added to this form. In that case, it's only one, it's the receipt sublist. And we can then drill down, see all the columns. And what I did here is I took the name, that's the leaf, file leaf ref, that's the name here. And if we expand the field, we see some aggregation functions here. We have sum, average, count, min, max, and simply double click to get this one here in brackets. So it's a count, and that's it. And it automatically updates this number once the items in the sublists are changing. Quite simple, isn't it? And that's my tab name. The rest is all done on the form of that particular sub-library here. Let me now close here. I will go over to my receipt list, which is a document library, as you can see. And here I also have a form customization button, and that's my edit form. And in this edit form, we have the whole logic. This is my form, and here we've added these things on the date field. We have a validation which checks a couple of things. From the receipt date, we check the full year and compare it with the year from the expense plus the month. We check, that's the validation here. On the kilometer field, we have the visible and the required expression, which is here exactly the same. It's just one single check. I check the expense type should be kilometer allowance. And if that's the case, show me the field, make it required, otherwise not. So that's also pretty simple and straightforward. And the same is in the required field. And of course for the cost field, it's just the opposite. It's not equal, it's not equal. It's just, main difference is this little, this part here. Not equal, it's not equal. And then down here, the total cost field, we see it's in the enable expression, it's set to be false. So it's the static, it's always disabled. I could make that dynamic as well. And it's calculated. And the calculation is also quite simple. We just check if it's allowance. That's a short notation of if else. If it's allowance, then make kilometer times allowance. Otherwise, take the receipt cost. And that is what it's saved in the total cost field. And last but not least, we have the cost center, which is a lookup. And in the lookup configuration, we can see that new option down here. Show me the new link, yes or no. Like this. Now the link is gone. Or yes, show it. And then we have the lookup filter. We do have a query builder for that. In the end, it generates this SharePoint camel query, which is the query language from SharePoint. And here we can define in the where area, we can define the filter. Here I can choose from the cost center list all the columns. I have this active flag, and I simply check that if it's equals by value, yes. We can say check for the form input or any expression, or a form input. I can choose a field which is on the current form to be for the filter, or here that's my static filter, only the ones which are yes. And now in the combination up here we have a rule or a condition, and this here is my flag show the inactive cost centers. So in this case I'm taking the rule to say if this filter should be applied or not. If I say if it's show me the inactive ones as well, then do not apply this filter at all, so it shows me all again. If it's no, then apply this filter. That's how it's done here. And I can also test this one. You see, it returns these 3 items. Looks good, okay. And that's my filter. Lookup filter, dynamic, static, however. Good. That's it for the form logic options. If you have any question, don't hesitate to reach out to me or to Skybow in general. Yeah. Then, thanks for watching and have a nice rest of the day. Thank you. Bye.